Here we have another video about language analysis, particularly going from grade 3 at GCSE to grade 4. In the rectangle, the purple rectangle, you can see 7 words, which I call effects words, which are always useful to use in a language response because it shows that you are talking about the effects of readers. You're aware that the writer will create something through language for a particular effect. So using some of those words in the purple rectangle, I always find relatively effective for students to do, and certainly something that students who get a grade 4 or above often do. The question that we're looking at, how does the writer use language to describe Berlin? And this is from a novel I read recently. So, tonight, for the first time this winter, it is very cold. The dead cold grips the town in utter silence, like the silence of intense midday summer heat. In the cold, the town seems actually to contract, to dwindle to a small black dot, scarcely larger than hundreds of other dots, isolated and hard to find on an enormous European map. Berlin is a skeleton which aches in the cold. It is my own skeleton aching. I feel in my bones the sharp ache of the frost in the girders of the overhead railway, in the ironwork of balconies, in bridges, tramlines, lampposts. The iron throbs and shrinks, the stone and the bricks ache dully, the plaster is numb. The city is cold and cruel and dead. Okay, so you might want to pause the video now to have a go at writing down any language techniques you notice, or any words, any adjectives, any verbs, for example, that you think are useful. If not, I will continue. So one of the things to do with language is to think about answers to these questions on the right. So in your own words, how is Berlin presented here? As I've said, select words and phrases that you think present Berlin in this way. Label any techniques. Are there any patterns of words that run throughout the whole extract that shares the same meaning? So, for example, are there any words that are repeated? Is there a semantic field? How would you feel if you were in Berlin, or if you were Berlin, how would you feel? If Berlin has been personified, then how do you think it would feel? And also for a higher level language task, are there any connotations that you think of with any of this vocabulary? Does it remind you of anything? What does it make you think? And that could also be something to tie in. If we are going to depict that extract visually through a picture, this can sometimes help students as well, then the examiner is wanting you to see something like this, a very cold, frosty image, the lamppost there frozen just as much as that person walking across the bridge. So it's a very bleak landscape that the writer is depicting here in Berlin, which is in Germany. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to get our highlighter, and we need to be able to engage with the extract critically. We need to jump into the extract, and we need to figure out what it is we're actually going to be talking about. And there's actually quite a lot of stuff in this extract that you could use. There's individual words, and there's also devices. And you can all see here the colours represent something different. So we've got simile, we've got a list, we've got personification at the bottom, we've got repetition or a semantic field relating to the cold in dark blue, and we've also got another semantic field actually, which is to do with sensations and discomfort and pain. Because as I'm sure we all know, if you stay in the cold too long or put your hand in a bowl of snow, it actually begins to hurt, as if it was burning. So there's also words here to reinforce that. You then obviously need to take those words, those devices forward and quote what you've highlighted, because two aspects of the mark scheme are to use terminology as well as to quote evidence. So you are marked on that, but also, of course, importantly, to talk about the effects on readers. So, like in previous videos, on the right-hand side here, we have an example of perhaps a grade 3 answer, maybe even a grade 2. The student says, Berlin is presented as cold. It says winter, which means cold weather. There is also mention of a skeleton. The iron throbs and shrinks, the stone and the bricks ache dully, the plaster is numb, emphasising how cold it is. The writer finishes by saying the weather was freezing. The city is cold and cruel and dead. So quite a short response. you might want to pause this video now and just think about what you would say to this student, or what you would write on their work here to help develop their answer, because unfortunately I don't think this has quite hit a grade 4 or above standard, but we need to ask ourselves why, so we can remedy it, so we can make it better. So this follows the same pattern as previous videos that I've done, which I think students find useful to see the difference between a grade 3 and a grade 4 or above. So whereas the student has quoted, they haven't used any terms. There's no verbs or adjectives or anything like that. They have quoted, but again, what lets them down is the fact that they haven't spoken really about effects in enough detail. They say that it's presented as cold, but that's it. But that's quite obvious, isn't it? That's not particularly perceptive analysis. They've also put in the middle there a long quote. They've quoted the whole of that sentence, that yellow sentence, and whereas you can do that, that takes time and it can actually detract away from the precision of your analysis. So you shouldn't really be copying long quotes out. But there isn't really any talk of connotations. There's nothing here that suggests the student is perceptive with their answer. So as we can see here, I've separated that answer and I've just put some questions in red of things to consider. So for example, how would you describe Berlin? Why has the writer used skeleton? What are the connotations of skeleton? What device is that? Or what devices is the iron throbbing and shrinking and the stone and the bricks aching? What device is that? What does that mean the writer is emphasising about the cold, if even inanimate objects are feeling pain because of how cold it is? They've used the word emphasising, which is really good. However, they haven't really expanded on, again, the idea of cold. Yes, it is cold, but they haven't really expanded it very much. And again, they repeat it again at the end. The writer finishes by saying the weather was freezing. You could push that by looking at the repetition of it. What does that suggest? If the word cold is going top to bottom of the extract, what does that mean? And again, how would you feel if you were in Berlin on this day? How would you feel if you were Berlin? How would you feel if you were visiting Berlin? What kind of sensations would you feel? So this is what needs to be included, or some of this needs to be included in order to improve it, which is what I'm going to show you now on the next slide. So here we have on the left-hand side, we have the grade 3 answer again. So the one that doesn't get as many marks. However, what we have done on the right now is we've taken their ideas and we've just elaborated a bit more. And obviously it's going to be a bit longer because you're saying more. But let's have a read of this one on the right now, and let's compare and contrast the differences between both of them. So the grade 4 or above candidate has said, Berlin is presented as if it is suffering and being punished by the extreme cold, making everything quiet and still. The writer reinforces the freezing conditions by using repetition of cold, as well as other words such as winter and frost, suggesting the cold is inescapable and all-consuming. This is emphasised by a list which refers to several different parts of Berlin, which are all being blighted and attacked by the cold: girders, balconies, bridges, tram lines, lampposts. The personification suggests that everything is feeling pain, such as the iron throbs and the plaster is numb, which emphasises that it is so deathly cold that inanimate things are feeling pain. Comparing Berlin to a skeleton using a metaphor suggests that Berlin is being assaulted by the coldness of day, with connotations of nakedness, being exposed, and vulnerability, as if nothing can protect the city from the weather conditions. Okay, so as I hope you can see, it's more detailed, at least. They've got devices in there, repetition, metaphor, what else have we got in there? List. So they have now appreciated terminology. They've quoted as normal, but the quotes are much shorter and precise. But what's more impressive is the fact that they have elaborated a lot more on why, really, the writer has used these words. Why have they used skeleton? Why have they repeated cold? Why have they used a list? And so on. And you've got at the bottom their connotations. So that is, again, a difference between a grade 3 answer on the left and a more detailed answer, which would get at least a grade 4 on the right. Okay, so use that information as you see fit to help improve your language analysis, and thinking about what process you need to go through in order to be more confident with your analysis.